Kinetics has been made in association with Road Race Parts. Top quality, best prices, no compromise. Head to roadraceparts.com to get parts for your racing vehicles.
Hello, welcome to a new episode of Velocity Kinetics. Today we're just going to have a quick recap of things in F1 at the moment, and possibility of what new engine rules might consist of, and touch a little bit on Formula E today. So, as we are at the moment, Hamilton stands to win the championship if he wins in Mexico this weekend. Vettel could still win, can still win. There's still plenty of races, well, plenty-ish enough races. There's still 75 points on the table, so he could still win the championship. Now, Hamilton has been driving very well. You can't, whether you like Hamilton or dislike Hamilton, you can't deny that he's been driving well. He's got at the moment, the upper hand with the car. He's making best use of it. He is winning, converting it into results. And he just keeps moving the bar up and up and up for pole position, number of pole positions scored. One thing that I'm not too fond of, well, not necessarily too fond of, I find it hard to warm up to, I guess, is probably the way to put it. Yes, it's all very well that he's got all these fastest pole position laps and things, but he's only ever really had to endure one season with a bad car, and even then it wasn't even the whole season. He still won. I believe he has got, if I remember rightly, he has got a statistic that most people would love to have, that he has not had a season in F1 where he hasn't won a race. Because in 2009, the car I'm referring to, that McLaren was not very good. It was absolutely trounced by the Brauns and the Red Bulls, even the Toyota as well, and Force India as well. But McLaren made it come good, and he won a couple of races towards the end. He was a rank outside chance for the title. But unlike a lot of drivers, he hasn't had to put the time in a bad car. Let me put something into what to me is into perspective. Schumacher put all those had that great big number of pole positions. Yes, I know there were a few years where the Ferrari just turned up and basically handed the winner's trophy, basically. But he put in fastest laps and pole positions in Ferraris that shouldn't have been at the front. He did it in a Benetton that shouldn't have been at the front either. Whereas most of the McLarens that Hamilton has driven, and the Mercedes, they've all been front running. So it's a very good record, undoubtedly. But I know you've got the best equipment, so therefore you are going to do the best job. But he's always had the best equipment, is any way to put it. If you even look at his idol, Ayrton, the McLaren MP4 8, I want to say it was, with the 4 Cosworth power before Senna left for Williams. He got pole positions in that when it shouldn't have been on pole position. He got pole positions in JPS Lotus, which should or shouldn't have been on pole position. That was when Williams and McLaren were really at the height of their battle. But he stuck it in places it shouldn't have been. Tolman, he did very good things. Senna did very good things with. Think back to other drivers. Prost did things with a Renault that shouldn't, strictly speaking, have been in places where it should have been. And McLarens that weren't the greatest of McLarens. Mansell did it with Williams. Cars that, again, shouldn't really have been where they were. Button did it in a BAR Honda when BAR were not where they should have been. Vettel did it in the Toro Rosso. So even though Vettel, again, has had quite a good string of good cars, he still has the fact that he put in his time in the Scuderia Toro Rosso. So I know I could say Toro Rosso, but I like saying Scuderia Toro Rosso. So, you don't need to look far to look at everyone else. Even if you go back to other drivers like Jackie Stewart, he got pole positions in Matras that shouldn't have been there. The Tyrrells, I don't know. because he won the championship with his championships with his Tyrrells, well, aside from the one obviously won with Matra, but he won championships in the Tyrrell. But when the Tyrrells were having teething problems, they still got into positions it shouldn't, strictly speaking, have been in. Jim Clark put Lotuses and things in places where it shouldn't have been. So lots of drivers have put in the effort in not so great cars. Hamilton has been exceptionally fortunate in his career that he's always seemingly been at the right place at the right time. Like he jumped to Mercedes from McLaren at the right time. I know he's had his flirtations with Ferrari, but he's also then turned around and said, "Oh, I would never drive for you, etc. Mercedes power is better than Ferrari power." It's if he went and won at Ferrari, even if it was just a couple of races in a Ferrari that wasn't that good, his reputation would be cemented as one of the greatest ever, if not the greatest by the time he's finished his career, is in terms of statistics. But then you've got the likes of Alonso, who dragged a Ferrari in 2012 into positions it should never have been in. He's got dragging the McLaren into places it shouldn't be in with that Honda engine. It's hard to warm up to Hamilton's numbers if you look at what he has. I have more of a soft spot for Ferrari than I do Mercedes. I'm not the biggest Ferrari fan, but sort of you've got to respect the scarlet red paint job, the yellow shield, the black prancing horse. You've got to respect the power and the passion and the history that Ferrari has. Doesn't matter whether you like them or hate them. You've got to respect it. And naturally, of course, I'd be much happy in these blogs to have a very different tone if it was Williams at the front doing all the winning. So it's hard really to say what to expect with Hamilton. What's more annoying me is people are talking now that the championship is a foregone conclusion, and it's not. You've got to, yes, if you look at Mercedes' recent form compared to what has happened at Ferrari, then yes, you could say, well, looking at that previous form, it would suggest that he's going to win. But Hamilton's engine could completely blow itself up on the way to the grid in Mexico. He might damage the chassis to such a degree that Mercedes can't build him another one. He might get black flagged. He might get taken out. You don't know until he crosses the finish line. You don't know where he's going to finish. Well, even then, depending on what misdemeanors he's had during the race, you don't know where he's actually going to finish. So stop talking of the championship as a foregone thing. This season's it's hardly been a classic so far. It's been nice though. It's been refreshing at points to have Mercedes versus Ferrari, to have two teams going at it. I don't mind if one team wins more than the other, because that's going to happen. Someone's got to win more races than the other to win the championship, or someone's got to finish better more often than the other to win the championship. I didn't like the Mercedes just walking and dominating everything the last few years. Don't get me wrong, every time a rule change comes around, someone will nail it. Always happens. But then if you look at what happened to Brawn, they nailed it. Should have in theory carried over into the Mercedes with Schumi and Rosberg, and it didn't. Red Bull became the dominant power, and they're still struggling to try and get back to the dominant, being a dominant power. So I guess some people say, "Oh, you're so conflicted, Chris. Why you sort of contradicting yourself?" I appreciate it might sound like I'm contradicting myself. The point I'm trying to make is I don't mind if someone wins all the time. I just don't want them to have a walkover. As much as I would love Williams to be the one doing all the winning, I wouldn't be so happy if they just dominated everything. So, on to driver movements. Kvyat seems to be out of Toro Rosso. I've just seen something on Twitter this morning. Helmut Marko said that Kvyat is not coming back to Toro Rosso. Whether that will be Toro Rosso Honda is another matter entirely, because with a new engine, you're going to need someone with a bit of experience behind you to try and direct the team. That said, Kvyat has not lived up to his reputation. He did really well in the Toro Rosso. He did fairly well in the Red Bull before being swapped around, and he's just never recovered. Whether he doesn't like the Ferrari engine in the back of the Toro Rosso, or the Renault engine, should I say, whether it's been going between the two things that have just caused him problems, we don't know. Excuse that noise. So we don't know what's going to happen with Toro Rosso. Sainz has gone off to Renault, and he did pretty well in Austin, bearing in mind he only just started at Renault. It'll be interesting to see what he does with the manufacturer team behind him. Be curious to see what Honda do next year with the Toro Rosso in the Toro Rosso powering them. Alonso has apparently been confirmed at McLaren on a multi-year deal. But I think Alonso's wasting his time. But then again, the seats are limited, so it's either you stay in F1 or you leave. You stay with a team that can pay you what you want is probably more like the case. And then you've got rumours of Massa being out at Williams, and then Kubica or Di Resta getting the seat. Now, the important thing to remember at Williams is because they've got Martini, which is a drinks company, sponsoring them. In some countries, the drinking age is 25, not 18, not 21. It's 25. Strange though, you can go off and serve your country at 16, but you can't drink until you're 18. So I can legally shoot someone in combat when I'm 16, but not buy a beer. Don't know. Anyway, philosophical questions and things aside, it's a hard one to say what Williams should do. Massa, I'll be honest, to me he's just looked exhausted this season. He could have potentially won in Baku before he had the issue. I think it was the left rear suspension failed or something to that effect. So he couldn't finish, and Stroll got a brilliant podium, and it could have been a Williams 1-2, which had been the first since the Williams BMW days, I think, if I remember rightly. Probably a Juan Pablo and Ralph Schumacher combination. I think that was the last time they got a 1-2 finish. That is not 1-2 qualifying, because it's happened. I don't think it has happened actually. So maybe we might even need to go back even further since the Williams 1-2. Appreciate we've only got to go back to 2012 for the last win, but it's still, that's nearly 5 years. It's over 5 years ago now. But anyway, Massa, to me, he's looked tired. He just hasn't shown as much promise. He lost out in the qualifying battles to Bottas when they were paired together. That said, when the Williams were more in contention for a victory, it was Massa who, more often than not, who was in the position for the victory. But as to what Williams should do, it's a tough one to call. I agree. I think Massa timed his retirement perfectly. And I don't think he should stay on another racing season. As much as it pains me to say that about young Felipe is not young anymore. As much as it pains me to say that about Felipe, I think he's had his time in F1. Much like how Jenson Button has said he's not coming back in F1 at all. Aside, unless of course he's super subbed contractually by McLaren, which I'm not sure where he stands with that anymore. Anyway, but unless he's contractually obliged to do it, then he won't stay. As to who they should take, I mean, Di Resta, bearing in mind he'd only had like 20 minutes in the car or something daft like that in Hungary, did a very good job, bearing in mind that he'd had no testing in the FW40. But Kubica is also a very interesting one to go with, because you have there'll be Polish industries and Polish companies that'll be interested in sponsoring a team in F1. Show what the Polish can do. So they're usually quite nice people. At least the Polish people I've ever interacted with, they've always been quite nice, quite friendly, and quite honest. Appreciate there'll be some racist people who will say, well, they're not. It depends on where you live. Appreciate where my parents live in Thetford. There's quite a large Polish population. A lot of them are quite nice. There are some that you do wonder why they came over here if they're not going to integrate. But that's beside the point. But anyway, there'll be a lot of Polish companies that will probably be interested in sponsoring Kubica. Williams would probably get a lot more money because of all the interest around Kubica coming back. And there would be a case of what will help you make it the best machine possible for him. And he probably will grab that car by the scruff of the neck and do some Alonso-style performances and just put it in places it shouldn't be. Because he did that with the Renault, he did that with the BMW Sauber. You're not a race winner for no reason. So, it's quite complicated to say what he should do. The rest is not without its talents, and I know Williams like to have an English or driver from the British Isles, or Great Britain, whatever word you want to use. They like to support English talent. So on that basis, like, well, why don't you get Julian Palmer in? Because he's old enough and he's English and he's got enough common sense. But in F1, you also make your own luck. And in one race in Renault, Carlos Sainz did better than Palmer had all year. So maybe Palmer's talent ran out at GP2. Maybe he just doesn't have enough talent to make it in F1. It's entirely possible. It's no different to a marksman preferring one type of rifle over another. It's no different to one driver preferring one set of engine rules to another. Like Vettel favoured the exhaust blown diffuser style driving because he could cope with it and it suited his style. Button liked the double diffuser because it suited his style and the way the Brawn was set up. Some drivers love oversteer, some prefer understeer. There's so many different things, but if you're someone who prefers oversteer, if your car understeers and you're not going to like it, you're not going to do as very good a job. The only other thing I think Williams could do, because some people are talking about this Kubica deal being a done deal, is they could have maybe tried to make a bid for Alonso, but Alonso would have had to take a massive salary cut. But, that said, with a salary cut, Alonso could have probably put Williams back on the map. Whereas this supposed McLaren-Renault deal, and Jai mentioned it in a Velocity Kinetics video not long ago, and I know we posted about it on the Facebook page. Ted Kravitz mentioned that the Renault hasn't actually been that much more reliable than the Honda. So actually, McLaren may not be any better off. That said, Renault Power has won in the back of the Red Bull. So they do stand a chance of winning, providing the chassis is up to it. So they might win more, they might get bigger results, but they might break down a bit more on the way. Give you one take with the other. So I don't know what's going to happen driver-wise. I think otherwise it's all pretty set in the driver market, unless someone over the winter decides they've had enough and wants to quit, or someone commits an infringement. That means they get fired, which could happen at any time, really, because the driver is just another employee. So we'll have to see what happens there. I mean, I'd love to see Kubica back in F1, but maybe Alonso might have been a smarter move for Williams. But we'll see what happens. On to engine regulations. They keep talking about all these new people who are interested in F1 in 2021, like Porsche. I've heard rumours that Toyota would be interested in coming back. Cosworth, Audi. I can't think of who the other company was now. There was another mainstream manufacturer who was curious. I know Ford have written it off because it's not part of their program, which I think is a silly move, but that's Ford's decision. Aston Martin, that's the one. Aston Martin are interested in coming in. But no one has said what the rules are going to be. Now, you'll probably won't need to look very far back, either in fan formula videos that Grace Cunningham used to put together, or in some of these Velocity Kinetics videos. You probably wouldn't need to look very far back for me to be very sceptical about the turbo rules. But I've warmed up to them. And I think they're very good because they've got lots of torque. They make the cars a bit more unpredictable. They got a bit of the unreliability in there. Yes, I appreciate the sound isn't going to be there, but it's a turbo. What point was a turbo engine ever louder than a naturally aspirated one? You don't need to be a brilliant mechanic to work it out. Look at a video or review of the Pagani Huayra versus Pagani Zonda F. The F is naturally aspirated and screams and wails. The Huayra is turbo and is quite quiet in comparison. But the Huayra is faster and more twitchy. So, you've got to give with one, take with the other. I think what they should do, because Formula E is on the up and Nissan have announced they're going to go in with Nismo and the Nismo brand into F1, Renault, for some reason, Renault EDAMs have decided they're leaving Formula E, which is a bit strange. But Renault have a history of sort of coming in sports and leaving them, coming back and leaving them. So if they might be dropping Formula E for WRC or something like that, or they're going to focus heavily on the F1 involvement. What the rules for 2021 should be, I'm not sure. I wonder whether they should decrease the displacement of the engine, so go from 1.6, say, down to 1.4, and then make more engine noise that way. Still keep the pressure at the current set pressure. Well, assuming that turbos are, say, you're not allowed to use any more than 4-bar turbo sort of thing, or something to that effect. But even then, there comes a point where they've got to start nailing the rules down because people need to start building these engines. But also, at the same time, they don't want to give anyone too great a heads up, because look at what Mercedes did with the new rules. They started very, very early. As soon as they knew what the rules were, started. That's why their engine was so reliable compared to everyone else's, and why the Mercedes teams, even now after 4 years, still enjoy a bit of an advantage over the Ferrari and the Renault powered teams, and the Honda powered team as well, even. So we don't know. Is the best way forwards. I would say maximum 950 horsepower. Take the engines down to 1.4 litres, or at least someone test to see whether 1.4 makes a better noise, or 1.5. I wouldn't go any smaller than 1.4, maybe even 1.3, because otherwise you're sort of starting to defy the laws of physics about what you're asking the engine to do. But say maybe shave it down to 1.4. Turbo pressure, I'd suggest either keep the pressure the same or go to twin turbo. I wouldn't go supercharged because, I don't know, supercharger whine just doesn't seem appropriate. You want noise, but you don't want whinging and whining noises, if that makes sense. And I would focus more on electrical power. So I'd say you need to generate at least... I wouldn't restrict how much you could use the electrical energy around the lap. I'd say you can use as much of it as you want. If you can harvest it, you can use it. But at least 200 of your car's horsepower needs to come from the electrical energy. So say, just to make the numbers even in my head, say for instance, it's sort of a case if you need to produce at least 200 horsepower of electrical energy, which means you can produce a maximum of 800 horsepower from internal combustion. But then it's up to the teams as to what their focus is on that. I imagine it'd probably end up being something like 400-600 split, if it was a 1,000 horsepower rule. And I'm not fond of the idea of the cars entering the pits under electrical energy. I was never sold on that rule when it was pitched. More because of the safety angle, to be honest. I know there's usually in some tracks there's a bell that rings whenever the cars enter the pits, but given when the cars come up the grid and they've got the engines are on, people don't always see them or hear them. Imagine adding in complete silence to that, unless they enter on petrol and leave on electric, which might be a good halfway house, because then the squeal of the tyres leaving the pit box would be a bit better. I would love to see Cosworth come back in as an engine supplier. Oh, coffee. I'd love to see Cosworth come back in as an engine supplier. Whether that be Cosworth and then rebranded as Aston Martin for the Aston Martin team, I don't. Well, for Red Bull, I don't know. Whether it will be an complete Aston Martin works job, whether it will be Mercedes rebranded as Aston Martin. Again, it's strange and confusing. But as I said in one of the previous videos, there's such a great opportunity for so much diversity. I think we need it, and I think they've got to do what they can to keep Honda in the sport and get more people in. On to Formula E that I've heard this morning. So I heard that Renault Edams is planning on leaving, which is strange because they've done very well, especially with Buemi. I don't know how many times they've won the Formula E constructors, if they've won it at all. But it's strange that Renault are wanting to leave, especially when they've got things like the Zoe, which is all electric, and they supply a lot of the electrical components for all the other teams. It's good to hear that Nismo are coming in, and Jaguar have come in. No, Audi have come in. I think VW's interested. Mercedes have said they're interested. Ferrari have said they would possibly consider it. So, it's quite good to see that Formula E, which a few years ago everyone was like, it's going to be an absolute waste of time, it's actually become quite popular. I'll be curious to know how many more manufacturers come in to that. Certainly keep my ear to the ground. Strange that Tesla haven't voiced an interest in being part of it. What a great place for them to showcase some of their technology. If they went into the team, actually, I think BMW also announced that they'd be interested in going in as well, or they are coming in. I can't remember what one it was. But we'll have to see how that goes. Trying to think if there's anything else. In other news, we've got an official Facebook page, as official as you can get for ourselves. Give it a look, watch some of the videos that are on there. Don't be afraid to comment or post things or share what we share, unless of course we say this is not ourselves, then as in this is not our own content, and be careful with what you share. Working on a Twitter page, but I'm so swamped with work at the moment I can't. I know it doesn't take long to set up a Twitter page, it's just I've got 2 or 3 different accounts for different things, and I can't remember what I have and haven't done with all those. Yeah, I think that's about it. Do apologise if this has been a bit rambly and a bit long, but it's good to talk. It's good to good to talk, or good to speak, whatever you want to call it. Apologies if I look a bit of a mess. I've been my work have asked me to do something as part of a special project they wanted me involved in, and as part of the special project yesterday, I was given 4 things to do, and given that today is my day off, it's like, we need this done by Thursday morning, and I had 3 hours yesterday to get about 6 hours worth of work done. So, as you probably can understand, my patience wore very thin yesterday. Quite tired, haven't been sleeping too well again. So, yeah, it's a bit hit and miss. Anyway, look after yourselves, drive safe. Hopefully soon, shortly there'll be our first attempt at a review of a vehicle on here. Now, bear with us, it is a first attempt, so camera angles, camera quality, frames per second, sound quality may not be as good as we would like it to be. But it's more, like I say, it's more a test to see whether it's worth us even going in this direction. It won't be of anything fancy. It's not going to be like a Ferrari or a Koenigsegg, as much as I would love to test one of them. It's just going to be a Suzuki. But it's a good little car, in my opinion. Anyway, more on that as and when that video becomes available. But like I say, look, drive safe, look after yourselves, and check out the Facebook.
Velocity Kinetics has been made in association with Road Race Parts. Top quality, best prices, no compromise. Head to roadraceparts.com to get parts for your racing vehicles now.